Are you frustrated with boundary setting in your difficult relationship? Maybe you're doing boundaries all wrong. I don't want to discourage you. I actually want to encourage and empower you. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on boundary setting, boundary maintaining. We're going to visit codependent behavior a little bit and pull it all together. I want you to leave this conversation feeling empowered, feeling strengthened, feeling better able to navigate your extremely difficult marriage with a guy that you're pretty sure is a narcissist. I don't want you surviving, I want you thriving. All right. The first thing is that Cloud and Townsend, they wrote a great book on boundaries, and then they followed it up with a number of other great books applied to different situations. And there's a lot of misinterpretation of what they're writing about and what they've been talking about for years now. And that is that boundaries are something that you do in a relationship, but primarily, and what is most important, is the boundary is something that you're setting for yourself on yourself. So, as I've said before, you're not asking something from him. I don't want you going and drinking with the boys. I, don't want you to do that or that. Boundaries, that's making it about him. And that is giving away your power. And that is, in many, many cases, actually feeding into the dance that you don't want to feed into. So the alternative is it's making an agreement with yourself. It's making a covenant with yourself, if you want to use that language. It is holding yourself accountable. If he goes out drinking with the boys, then I will do X, Y, Z. So if I've told him I don't want you to go out drinking with the boys because you always cause trouble, and your last time you went, your friend got arrested, based on a true story, not me. If you've said that, then communicate a consequence. If you go out drinking with the boys one more time, then I'm leaving you. Then that's basically he's eavesdropping. What you're doing is you're communicating a boundary to yourself, and you're allowing him to eavesdrop. So it's not threatening, it's not an ultimatum, it's you communicating to him, hey, just so you know, I value myself this much, I love myself this much, that if you go out drinking with the boys and getting into trouble, then I am going to change the locks on the door. For example, I'm just making something up. If you say that, only say that if you're willing to follow through and stick to your guns and actually deliver on the covenant that you've set with yourself. If he does that, I'm going to value myself, love myself, respect myself enough that I'm going to protect myself from somebody that is unreliable and um, and clearly doesn't love and respect me. So, the way to think about boundaries in a more life-giving way, in a more kind of I think a way that is more sensible, is that boundaries are really about claiming emotional sovereignty over yourself and respecting the emotional and behavioral sovereignty of your husband. So, for example, if somebody from another country wants to enter the United States, they have to show up at the border with the necessary visa in most cases, and some person at the border control will determine whether that visitor to the U.S. is allowed to enter or not. Right. So and that person is allowed to do that, and the United States government is allowed to do that because the U.S. has sovereignty over this land. Right. So you want to have sovereignty over the kind of behavior that you permit yourself to be exposed to. You want to have sovereignty over the kinds of thoughts that you think, because your thoughts or in the sovereign territory of your mind, which is something you have sovereignty over. Really, you do. And similarly, emotions, you want to have sovereignty over your emotions. You get to feel whatever you want to feel. This is still boundaries. And if your husband says, for example, that uh, you should feel so guilty because you didn't pick me up from the bar when I was drunk, he's infiltrating your sovereign territory with a guilt bomb, asking you to feel guilty about a behavior. Briefly and quickly examine your heart and say, did I do anything wrong specifically that I should feel guilty about? Answer is no, in most cases. And then invoke your emotional sovereignty. That emotion of guilt that he's trying to impose upon you is not allowed in. It's turned away at the border of my sovereign self. I'm not going to let that guilt in. This is still boundaries because don't just have the freedom, but you have the responsibility to take emotional sovereignty over your own self and only feel what you want to feel. And of course, what you should feel. If you really do something wrong, you should feel guilty. And that feeling of guilt that's appropriate. That's correct and accurate. I did something wrong. I feel guilty. Until you take care of it in whatever way of seeking forgiveness and absolution for the wrongdoing. This concept of emotional sovereignty is really, it's my rewriting of the whole collected works on the topic of codependency. Because emotional sovereignty is really the opposite or almost the antidote to codependency. And we know, Damaris and I know that we regularly end up having conversations about codependent behavior, thoughts, and emotions with women that we're working with in our coaching work, because many women that find themselves in extremely difficult relationships have both a husband that is extremely difficult and the women are bringing baggage from their past, from home growing up, that hasn't been completely cleaned up. There might be lots of awareness there might be lots of insight, but there may still be the old programming in their spirit, in their nervous system, that makes them susceptible for codependent choices. And so, as we've been reflecting and prayerfully working with women, we've recognized that better language, more life-giving, more constructive language is there's a problem of sovereignty, a lack of sovereignty, a lack of clear borders and clear border control that controls what comes in and controls what goes out. Because here's the other dimension of boundaries and where boundaries meet codependency. Hang on for this for a little bit. If I say to my wife, hey, make sure that you do X, Y, Z, if it's genuinely a suggestion, then great. She's going to feel genuinely free to take up that suggestion and that invitation or not, right? So that's the give and take of a healthy relationship. I can make a suggestion. Hey, I'd love to have pecan pie for dinner. So when you stop at Costco, can you pick up that pecan pie? I'd love that. So I'm making a suggestion. And she's free to yes or no. Traffic's crazy. I'm not going near Costco based on a true story. However, if my ask is not really an ask, but it's a demand, you need to stop at Costco and get that pecan pie with all kinds of emotional baggage implications underneath. And it's not feeling like a suggestion. It's feeling like I am exerting control. This is where codependency comes in. I'm trying to control somebody else's behavior. I'm trying to get them to do what I want them to do so that I feel under control. And we're in the realm of codependency. And in kind of sovereignty language, what I'm doing is I'm invading another country. right? I'm emotionally invading another country and um, taking over the country, right? So it's like a coup in the country. I'm taking over the country of my wife's sovereignty, and I'm trying to exert control and installing my own government in in her sovereign territory. And that's not okay. That's not okay in any way, right? So there's where my attempting to control, my attempting to fix, my attempting to be helpful where help hasn't been asked for. This is codependent stuff, and it is absolutely boundary violation. It is absolutely violations of emotional sovereignty. All right. If you haven't booked a 15-minute call with us, click the link below, book a 15-minute call, and check in, and we'll see together collaboratively whether what we have will be helpful for you in a more in-depth way to really break you free, give you liberty, give you freedom in your relationship if you want to stay in your relationship. Full disclosure, we work with some women that at the end of the process, uh, they're at a place where they're saying, hey, Don and Damaris, thank you so much. This has been a really, really powerful, transforming experience for me. And it's got me to the place where I feel empowered and strengthened and liberated to leave the marriage. We're not advising that. We're not directing that. That's not our agenda. But that is the outcomes in some cases. She's made peace with her own sort of cultural rules. She's made peace with, in many cases, sort of scriptural guidelines for divorce, and and sometimes that is what success looks like. All right. So book the 15-minute call, reach out, connect, and let's see if we can be helpful for you. Let's see if what we have fits with what you need, and let's see if we can transform your life. All right.